Well, I think we'll get started here. If my watch is close to yours, I think we're at or very close to 1 o'clock. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2013 World Dairy Expo. I don't know if it's still raining outside a little bit, but it's kind of a nice break to come into the Lions Center and learn a few things. So we're happy to sponsor the speaker today. By the way, my name is Mary Elva-Krogh, and I am with Badgerland Financial. And we're, again, happy to sponsor today's seminar, Adaptation of Revenue Risk Management and Why Knowing Your Income Over Feed Cost is Important. So I think it's got to be the longest title of any session we have going on at Expo this week. So our speaker today is Dr. Brian Gould, professor of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Gould is currently a professor in the Department of Agriculture and Applied Economics and University of Wisconsin Extension at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His areas of research expertise include dairy marketing, dairy price risk management, U.S. dairy policy, and the analysis of food purchase behavior by U.S. households. Professor Gould has received numerous teaching and extension-related awards over his career. He has published more than 45 referred journal articles on a variety of topics. His extension efforts are centered on increasing the use of price and revenue risk management by dairy producers, processors, and users of dairy products. So, with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Gould.
Give me a signal when it's okay. We all set? Okay. Thank you, Mary, and I want to thank Badgerland for hosting this event. Just before we get started, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. How many people here are dairy farmers? How many people forward price their milk? How about forward price your feed? Okay, we're going to have a lot to learn today then. Okay, so I did not make up that title. I'm a sort of, I would never do something like that, but the organizers of this session picked it up. But what I want to do today is, let me tell you first before I get started a little bit about myself. I've been at the UW for about 25, 26 years in a variety of capacities, and I've been with the Ag Econ department since 2005. And I teach everything from beginning Econ 101 to a graduate class in statistics. So I have a broad range of activities, but my research and extension interests are in terms of dairy marketing. And so we're going to talk about revenue risk management, and it's for those of you who have been around for a couple of decades or more in terms of working in the industry. Think about the alternatives that we have available to us now versus, say, in 95 with respect to trying to manage our risk. Now, back in 95, we didn't have as much volatility as we have now, but again, we have all sorts of mechanisms that have evolved in response to that increasing price risk, not only on the output price side, but on the input cost side as well. So what I want to do today, I'm just going to go through, sort of set the stage. We've all lived this, sort of tell us where we are in terms of cost of production or feed cost and revenue, sort of set the stage. And then I'm just going to go through some very, very simple margin management alternatives. And this is not meant to be all-inclusive. It's very, 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 very simple, but it gets you at least thinking about the alternative things that can be done to try to manage your risk. And think about it. If you can manage your risk and the volatility either on the output price side or the input cost side or on your revenue, if you get rid of that negative portion of the distribution of those bad events, your average has to go up, right? So even though you don't try to, the objective of risk management is not try to maximize profits, it's try to manage that downside risk. By the very definition of an average, if you get rid of the negatives or the lower values, your average is going to go up. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some simple examples, and then I'm going to try to draw some implications in terms of what it means in terms of your operations, because we're going to be talking about futures and options. And again, there's lots of basis risks floating around in terms of your price at the farm level versus what's in Chicago. So we're going to try to mean if I'm setting say an income over feed cost floor, what does that mean in terms of my own farm? You're going to need to know your basis between the various components of that income over feed cost calculation. So we're going to talk about that. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'd like to keep this real informal. I've got lots of slides, but a lot of them are pictures, so we'll go through them relatively quickly. So feel free to ask a question as we go along. And if you want to download my PowerPoint, it's on the last page of the handout, which is on the front desk as you came in. You see some contact information there. I haven't wait till I get home tonight and I'll put it up on the web. But that'll be the address that'll be at. Okay? So this is a diagram of, is there any way we can, no, we can't, okay. This is a diagram showing monthly mailbox prices for California and the upper Midwest. And mailbox prices, as you know, by their name, is basically what you get when you open up your mailbox and take out your monthly check. Okay, includes all the quality differentials, but also all the deducts you got in terms of like transportation costs, the 15-cent checkoff, all of that is taken out, and you've got your mailbox price. A couple of things to note. One is we know that California is going through some major revisions in terms of their pricing system, is how the upper Midwest typically has higher milk prices in terms of mailbox prices, and which is dominated by Class 3, than California. And it's not a little amount. It's over $1 a hundredweight. And the other thing to get out of this is the volatility. Now, if I went all the way back to the 80s, the volatility that we're experiencing would really be accentuated. Prior to the mid-80s, our manufacturing milk price was basically equal to the sport price. So if you wanted to know what your milk price was going to be next month, if you knew what the sport price was going to be, you know what your milk price was going to be. And if it doesn't change, your milk price wouldn't change. Well, that's gone by the wayside. We'll never have that type of situation again. So two trends here, the volatility, and I give you some dramatic changes over just short periods of time. And the thing to realize is, again, these are the output prices. Costs have not really changed that dramatically, especially prior to 2005. Okay, so we have some really dramatic changes in terms of within a 12-month period, the doubling or halving of our output price. Now, this is a diagram showing, I'm sure all of you have heard about the Farm Bill and the machinations going on, and I'm not sure we'll have a 2013 Farm Bill. Just like last year I said I didn't think we'd have a 2012 Farm Bill, and for once I was right. The Dairy Security Act, which is part of the dairy subtitle of the proposed Farm Bill, has a ration that's used in their proposed margin program, and I'll go through that margin insurance program. I'll go through that right at the end of the talk. And in that, they have a ration, and it's a heavy ration in that it includes all cows, whether they're dry, heifers, or whatever, are all attributed to the milking herd. That's why we have 102 pounds per hundredweight of milk, because it includes all cows on the farm attributed to that milking herd. You can debate about whether that's appropriate or not, but that's what it is. And you can see, again, the volatility that we have. But lately, it's been almost a steady increase. And again, between April of 2010 and August 12, we had a doubling of our ration costs. And we had fairly good dairy prices then, but in 2012, they took a hit. So again, we have dramatic movements on the output price side, and these days, after the renewable fuel standards came into play, we've had some dramatic increases, and we're starting to see some declines in those feed costs. There's some talk about having $3.50 corn again, which would be a real interesting phenomenon. So what this has done is this made us as an industry think about maybe we shouldn't just be protecting the output price. Maybe we should take a look at our margins and try to protect that margin volatility. Okay? And I'm going to define margin as income over feed cost. That's income over purchase feed cost. Okay, that's going to be my definition of a margin. So what I've done is I've put these two things together, the DSA ration and the mailbox prices, and I've calculated the average, the Federal Milk Marketing Order, that's what FMO stands for, mailbox over feed cost margin monthly from 2005. And I only went back to 2005 because that's all the data we have in terms of soybean meal prices, cash soybean meal prices. And again, you can see the volatility. We go all the way from $14 during the good times in 07, in the beginning of 08, down to $2 by 2009. Again, a dramatic change in our returns. And again, we're heading up. You can see that 754 that was last month, or excuse me, in I forget August maybe or September. Again, that's mainly due to the reduction in those feed costs. Okay, so volatility at the margin level. So maybe we should think about how do we control margins. That's what I want to talk about today. So how do we, as decision makers, think about risk? Well, there's certain components of our activity that represents a risky environment. First, we have to have alternative possible outcomes that we're faced with. You as dairy producers, it's the alternative output price, alternative class 3 price. You don't know what level that's going to be. It can go anywhere. We've seen $8.90 all the way up to over $20. Okay, so here we have, again, I'm talking about here income over feed cost. We have a whole different series of values that could arise depending upon what's going on the output price side, what's going on the cost side. Okay, and so we can think about, again, this is a conceptual way of thinking about the problem. We have all our possible choices and we sort of delineate them. And then we think about, okay, what's the probability or the likelihood of each of those events happening, right? So we've got all these probabilities, and we do that, we don't do that with pencil and paper, but we have a gut feeling. Is it likely, given today that we've got $15 milk, that we're going to have $8 milk in 4 months? It's again, we sort of think about the environment that we're in, and we try to assess some probabilities, and we take all those probabilities, and just again in a informal way, and come out with some expected, or the average, weighted average, or the weights of the probabilities, in a sense, of all those outcomes, and it gives us what we think today our income over feed cost is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 months down the road. Okay, so that's ahead of the time, though. That's the expected income over feed cost. We're looking at today's market environment. Say we look at the futures, we get an idea of what's likely to occur. We assess some probabilities, and we come out with an expected income over feed cost. But then reality sets in, and that actual may differ from our expected. And that difference is what we call risk. Okay? And what we're going to talk about today is how we can bring those squares closer together. How we can reduce that risk. Maybe not get rid of all of it, but reduce the risk. And notice I did not say maximize income. That's not our objective here. Our objective is to control that risk, control that difference. Because if we know what that actual income over feed cost is, we can plan for that. It's when we get that big difference, I can go on the plus side or the negative side, we haven't prepared our operation to deal with that. Okay? So how can we characterize the degree of market risk margin risk that you face? Well, again, you have to have alternative outcomes in front of you. And again, we can think of income over feed cost. Think about your own operation over the last 12 to 24 months, and think about what your mailbox price was and what your average feed cost was. Whether you want to include your own homegrown feed or not, you take a look at that difference, and again, that'll give you an idea of what the potential outcomes are. And you have to be unsure as to what those outcomes are going to be. If you have everything forward priced, think about it. If you have everything forward priced, both your milk and your feed, you have no risk, right? You know what your income over feed cost is going to be. But if you don't do that, then you're faced with some risk. Again, margin risk increases the more you don't know about what potentially could happen. Now, the futures markets give us some idea of what potentially could happen, and those changes on a daily basis, but we get Again, that futures markets and options market is what the market thinks the future is going to hold for the dairy industry. And again, that's revised every day. But again, if you don't know what the potential outcomes are, then you have a lot more risk. If you don't know what the likelihood is of these events to occur, again, think about that tree diagram I had. I'm just going down that tree or up that tree. If you don't know what the likelihood of an event happens, again, the more risk you have. And then, obviously, what that means for your own operation. Okay, it's one thing if we've got $15 milk, but if we have $15 milk with $3 corn, that means something different than if we've got $15 milk and $7 corn. So again, what is the implication of these outcomes in terms of your dairy operation? And the more you don't know about that, the more risk you're faced with. So here's some questions we typically ask. What's the range of income over feed costs you've obtained over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What proportion of the months did your income over feed costs be between certain ranges? And I'll go through an actual example here in a minute. And again, what's the impact on those income over feed cost levels on your sustainability? That is that income over feed cost going to cover your fixed cost of production? Right? You want to cover your fixed cost and then hit away a little bit at the minimum, a little of your variable cost. You've got to know what that means in terms of the sustainability of your operation. So what are your fixed costs versus variable costs? Again, you should know that if you're trying to think about setting appropriate risk management targets. Okay, so this is actual monthly mailbox prices, the distribution between certain levels, less than 10, 10 to 11, and what have you, in $1 increments, between January of '95 till May of this year. I'm off a couple of months. But those are mailbox prices. Again, those are again, takes into account all the quality premiums and any deducts you have off of your milk check. And I compare both California and the upper Midwest. If you're in California, you face a different type of distribution than what you do in the upper Midwest. You can see the upper Midwest, which is the red, tends to be higher on the red side for higher values of mailbox prices, whereas California tends to be on the lower side. And I give you the averages over that time period, and we can see there's about $1.30 difference average mailbox price between California and the upper Midwest. So those are the monthly, the distribution, what we call the distribution of these mailbox prices. Now what I want to do is I want to add up all of the vertical heights of these bars, okay? And we get to what's known as a cumulative distribution. What's the probability of getting $15 or less mailbox? What's the probability of getting $17 or less mailbox? That's what those figures show you. And again, for example, I'm picking out $10 to $15. Looking at using actual historical data, there's a 30% probability that the California mailbox price, given our historical data, again, economists like to use history as a guide, there's almost a 30% probability that the California mailbox will be greater than or equal to $15. But if I look at what has happened in the upper Midwest, we have almost a 45% probability that it's going to be greater than $15. So again, I'm trying to get some sort of probability assessment using history as to what's the likely values to occur. But again, this is just based, and you can do this if you have good records. Take your 20 years of tax forms. You can easily derive this because you'll have all your prices in your records, hopefully. And you could do the same thing and give you an assessment of what your mailbox is, because your mailbox could be a lot different than this, because if you have a Jersey herd, for example, you're going to have a lot more per hundredweight than you are with a Holstein, but you're going to have less hundredweight, of course. Okay, so that's how one way we characterize your margin risk is by looking at those probability curves, both the distribution and then the cumulative distribution to give us a sense of what's likely to occur. Now let's look at on the ration side. Again, this is the dollars per hundredweight of milk. And what I did is I used actual data for, this must be for the U.S. as a whole, for the DSA ration. And these are dollars per hundredweight of milk, not per hundredweight of feed. So then I, again, added up those, and I got a cumulative distribution of what those DSA ration costs are. And looking at history, we have about a 20% probability that that ration cost is going to be greater than $12 a hundredweight. Okay, now that's going to change through time, but again, it gives you a sense of the likelihood of getting a certain level. Okay, now you may want to discount that. Again, this is just using U.S. numbers, no basis information. So if you were to do this on your own operation, you want to include your farm costs of getting that feed into that cow. Again, here's the distribution of the mailbox price, income over feed cost. So I took the difference between the mailbox prices for the U.S. as a whole and the ration cost. And I got a frequency distribution of those, and these are dollars per hundredweight of income over feed cost. Okay, sort of looks like a bell-shaped curve. And again, I did the summation to generate the cumulative. And again, this is what it typically looks like. It's typically S-shaped. And using historical data, we had about a 31% probability that the income over feed cost is greater than $9. And what does that mean for your operation? What if it was 30% that it was, which means there's 70% probability that it's less than $9, but what if that had been 30% that it was greater than $5? That'd mean there would be a 70% less than less than 5. And what does that mean for your operation? Again, you have to trying to put some bounds on the likelihood of certain events happening and trying to relate that again back to your operation. Again, this is actual data. So what do we want to do is for margin risk management? Well, we have two scenarios. One, we've got, it's nice to be a manager when times are good, right? It's hard to be a manager when times are bad. During 07, 08, and 09. It's a tough time to be a manager. So what I want to do for risk management is turn that frown, even though the markets are going down, into a smile. That is, try to control my distribution or the likelihood of certain levels of income over feed cost or margin that's going to occur. And that way I can, even though I've got some down markets, I can control that impact. I can reduce that negative impact on my condition by taking the appropriate actions. Okay? So that's the objective of margin risk management, is to put a smile on your face. Okay, so I always like to relate typical risk management activities that you undertake, not in terms of being a producer, but just in terms of having a family and a household to maintain. Here I'm talking about buying workman's comp insurance for your employees. Well, you don't want to use that, right? You don't want to have to put a claim into workman's comp. But you like to have it there so that your assets are protected, right? So I use that as an example. That's a form of risk management, right? You're trying to control the downside effects of having a major workman's comp claim put in, or excuse me, injury on your farm. Same thing happens on the financial side. Again, we want to have it there in case we need it, but we hope we don't have to use it. But the one thing is, it comes at a cost. Okay, risk management comes at a cost, and it's up to you as a manager to decide what the trade-offs are that are acceptable to you. Is the cost of getting that level of protection, does that give me that level of protection that justifies that cost? And again, it's farm specific. Okay. So the margin risk management principle is something I put together. Is by undertaking a particular strategy, one can increase the probability of achieving a desired margin outcome. Okay, I'm not saying you're going to achieve it, but you're at least going to get rid of that negative portion. And think about those distributions that I showed you that had like a bell-shaped curve. I want to get rid of those low sides of that distribution. And again, if I get rid of that low side, my average is going to go up, right? Hopefully. The thing about this, undertaking this principle, your desired outcome has to be realistic given what the current market conditions are, right? You can't try to plan and try to set up something where you're going to get $9 or $10 income over feed costs when we've got $12 milk floating around. That's not realistic, given what the current environment is. So it has to be conditional on the current environment. Again, what can the market actually give me? So you have to be realistic, and in terms of setting those objectives, they have to take into account where we stand now and where we're likely to be over the length of that strategy. Okay. Again, I like to think of margin risk management as any other input. The return from that input is not dollars and cents per se. It's, again, affecting that distribution of those, whatever outcome variable you're looking at, whether you're just looking at the output price or you're looking at your margin. So there's a risk-return trade-off, and you have to evaluate, is it worth me doing this? Do I get a level of protection that's worth the cost? And that risk-return trade-off depends upon the type of program you undertake. And I give two examples here. One, I'm going to show you some programs where you can fix your income over feed costs. Okay? But if you fix your income over feed costs, think about it. If you have a fixed price feed contracts and fixed price for your milk, you know what your income over feed costs. The problem is, the trade-off is, I can't take advantage of higher milk prices or lower feed costs. That's the trade-off, plus the cost of doing that activity. You compare that to, say, if I establish, and I'll show you some examples where you can set a floor on your income over feed costs. But with that floor, now the trade-off is different. It may cost more from a dollar cents, but you can take advantage of either higher milk prices, lower feed costs, or both. So the trade-offs are different. So it's very, very important when you talk to a professional, and I'm not a professional, I'm an extension educator trying to provide you some ideas of things that you can get involved with. What are the trade-offs with this particular strategy, and know what the trade-off differences are across strategy. Okay, so let's go through some mechanisms that we currently do. These are all available to us right now. Again, I got to emphasize it comes at a cost, but they're available. So strategy one, again, let's use a forward price contract for milk and feed. Okay, so I've gone out, forward contracted my feed. I went to my plant and I got a 12-month contract for, say, $16 milk. Okay, so there's our fixed milk price, whatever that is. There's our fixed feed cost. Again, these are dollars per hundredweight of milk, so I've converted the feed to feed dollars per hundredweight of milk. And that difference is constant, and it's constant regardless of what's going on in the marketplace after you initiate those fixed contracts, right? You can't move from there unless you want to do some other activities. But with these contracts, you cannot move from that, and the question you have to answer, is that enough to cover at least the fixed portion of my non-feed costs, and hopefully both the fixed and variable cost portion of the non-feed costs. Okay, so you don't want to set that IOFC star at $2 less than your fixed costs, right? Because you're going to be losing money. So it's important to know what your margin is, what your cost structure is. Whenever you're doing risk management, know what your cost of production. That's fundamental to any of these things we're talking about. You need to know your cost of production and how they're divided up between fixed and variable cost. So that's strategy number one. Okay. Strategy number two, let's suppose that we enter into a contract with our plant to sell our milk at a fixed price, and I decide to protect my feed costs by using call options. Okay. Remember, a call option gives you the right but not the obligation to purchase a futures contract at a given price. Okay. So the price of that right depends upon what that option price you want to buy, that level of protection relative to what the market is. Again, what the options price is relative to the current futures for that particular month. The further in advance we're talking about, the more expensive those options. And if there's a lot of volatility in the market, those options are going to be more expensive as well. So again, they're a very dynamic type of environment. So forward price your milk, cover your cost, your feed cost with an option, call option. So again, here's the setup. Again, there's our fixed milk price. So even if milk prices go up, I can't take advantage of that, right? Because I've signed a contract with my plant. Now, it's an interesting question, and I don't know, maybe some of you will sell your milk to a private plant. With the '08 Farm Bill, private plants were allowed to enter into fixed price contracts with their patrons and therefore have the possibility of paying less than the federal order minimums. I don't know, with the '08 Farm Bill having expired, whether it's legal to enter into fixed price contracts with the private firms. It's not. Well, existing contracts are already, because they were set up during the rules, so that's a real problem, right? That's a real problem. So anyways, that's an aside. I had that thought this morning, and I said, you know, geez. Oh, okay, thank you. The comment was made that USDA announced that setting up minimum price contracts or fixed price contracts with a private plant is no longer allowed because the '08 Farm Bill has lapsed. And we're back to old legislation. Yes, they. Why would a plant? Well, you can enter it as long as it's going to be, but you don't know it's going to be above the federal minimums. So, okay, so that's the output price side. Again, these are all per hundredweight, dollars per hundredweight of milk. And there's my feed call at C dollars, right? And now, this is what my profile looks like in terms of my income over feed costs. Hey, if prices go down after those calls, after you purchase that call, you can sell that call at that price and make some dollars on the option side and apply it to your income over feed costs. So now there is some possibility of taking advantage of lower feed costs. Excuse me, I said that wrong. You can take advantage of lower feed costs by not exercising your call, but if those feed costs go up, boom, you exercise that call and it's going to be fixed at IOFC star. Okay, so you can take advantage. Again, this is an example of a different risk-return trade-off depending upon strategy. Okay, now this is going to cost different than the previous example. So let's look at number 3. So I'm going to use a Class 3 put option. Again, these are all strategies that are available now. Use a Class 3 put option to put a floor on your milk revenue and forward price my feed. That's a very common situation in Wisconsin. Okay? So again, remember, purchasing a put conveys the right but not the obligation to sell a futures contract at a given price. And you want to exercise that put when that milk price falls below that put level, that strike price. Okay, so let's look at what that profile looks like. Okay, so what I'm doing here, again, I'm setting up an income over feed cost floor. Again, but I'm doing it a different way. All right, how am I doing that? Well, again, there's my feed price represented by that forward price contract that I have with my feed dealer. And then I've got a P dollar put, right? So my milk price can't go below P dollars, right? And so if it does go above P dollars, hey, my feed costs I'm going to have at C dollars, but I can take advantage of those higher market prices. Again, a different way of being able to capture market changes. Okay. Again, a different strategy, different cost structure. And sometimes those, as you know, those of you involved in the market, those options, depending upon what the strike price of those puts are relative to the futures for that month, could be very expensive. But maybe not. If you do an out-of-the-money put, be a little conservative, it may not be that bad. Okay, so that's strategy number 3. So this is not a fixed income over feed cost environment. You can take advantage, and now you could probably tell what strategy number 4 is going to be. I'm going to combine both the use of puts and calls. And let's see what that does to our income over feed costs. So we're going to purchase a Class 3 puts, the appropriate amount, and the appropriate amount of feed calls. and I'm going to have a feed cost ceiling represented by C star, the level of my call. But again, if feed cost after I purchase that call go down, I can take advantage of that lower feed cost. On the opposite side, hey, my revenue can't go below P star, and that P star is net of any cost of undertaking that activity. But if that price goes up, my, I shouldn't use C dollars there, my income over feed cost can go up. So there's 3 different levels of income over feed cost possible with this strategy. A dollars will be the minimum income over feed cost. You can't do any worse than that. Again, let's assume that that's net of any costs of undertaking that activity. But if we have low feed costs, then we're going to have A plus B. If we have high feed cost, but I'm going to have a high milk price, I'm going to have A plus C. And if I have both events, a reduction in feed costs, which 6 months ago we never thought would happen, but now we see it's happening, and we received some unexpected good news that our milk prices are going to be higher, we have the potential of getting an income over feed cost of A plus B plus C. So under this strategy, I can take advantage of positive price movements, whether it's on the feed side or on the revenue side. Again, a different risk-return trade-off. And my hypothesis is this would be one of the more expensive type of strategies that one would undertake. But again, you have a different objective. You have a different possibility of outcomes. So think about that. Remember, think of that tree diagram I gave, and I had all these outcomes. These outcomes are different depending upon strategy, right? So that's important to know what the potential outcomes are. And I see this more often than not, that producers enter, and I don't mean to be, well, I am lecturing, but I see producers not understanding what that risk-return trade-off is. What is the possible outcomes with this strategy that I undertook? Okay, that's very important to know. And again, these are very simple activities, and a good broker should tell you that, should go through what are the possible outcomes, both on the positive side and negative side. Okay, so strategy number 5, I'm not going to do a diagram because it's the same thing as using a put. I'm going to use a minimum price contract from your plant. Lots of plants have those. The plant collects all the minimum price contracts wanted by their patrons. They then go out and buy the appropriate number of puts, add a cost, administrative cost to that activity, and there's your fixed milk price. And what they do is they go out and say you want to do a 6-month minimum price contract. The plant will go out and take an average of those 6 months of futures, for class 3, minus 10 or 15 cents a hundredweight to cover their administrative costs, and there's your minimum price. Again, if that cash price is less than the contract price, your milk check will be increased to the difference times that. So again, I'm setting an income over feed cost floor. Okay, because I'm still using calls on the other side. Another strategy, I'm almost done here, is what's called a min-max strategy. And I've seen a number of plants that have, or min-max option, that's not the right word, a min-max characteristic of a contract. I've seen a number of plants do this. And what this contract type of contract is, it's only talking about on the output price side, but you have a minimum price, i.e. like a put, but you also put a ceiling on what you want to possibly get, and that will reduce your cost of undertaking that activity because you're going to sell a put instead of buy one. So here's what it looks like. Let's assume that we're still using calls, and again, it looks a lot like what we had before when we were using both puts and calls, but here I'm having an upper limit on my milk price of P sub U. Okay, so my maximum, if I brought that C dollars, I shouldn't have used, again, the same C. If I took that C dollars and put it to the right, that would be the maximum additional revenue I would get. That will reduce the cost because there is no unlimited upside potential for you. You have a limit to how much that price can go up, so therefore that's going to be a less costly strategy. But again, you need to know that. You need to know what the possible outcomes are when you're undertaking that. Okay? And finally, here's something that I've been heavily involved with. Probably some of you have heard about it or heard me talk about it through the years. Is another strategy is livestock gross margin insurance. And that is equivalent to doing what I call the bundle option, which is not a quite correct terminology, but where you're using both puts and calls. We're setting a minimum income over feed cost floor by using this margin insurance. And basically this margin insurance says, hey, if your margin goes below the target, you're going to get an insurance payment up to the difference of the target versus what reality is. Okay? But again, it's a income over feed cost floor. But again, you have the potential of taking advantage of higher higher milk prices or lower feed costs. Okay, so again, for those of you who haven't heard, I'll have only 2 or 3 slides on this. LGM dairy is like a bundle option where you have put and calls, except there's no market activity. When you're buying an insurance contract, LGM insurance contract, there's no market activity either by you or the USDA in terms of the futures and options market. It's just used as a place to get information. What are the expected prices when I purchase this insurance contract today? Okay, so there's no minimum size limit, unlike futures and options, which is nice. You could do 10 hundredweight if you wanted to, just to try it out. There's an upper limit of 240,000 hundredweight within a 10-month period or within a particular crop year. The nice thing about this LGM, and I'm not sure why they did it this way, but the premium, you can insure your milk margin. You can set that floor for up to 10 months in advance. Anywhere from 1 to 10 months. Actually, it's 2 to 11 months in advance. And you have the option or the choice of saying only insuring 2 months. If you want to insure just the first 2 months. That premium is not due until 9 months after that. So the premium, regardless of how many months you're insuring, is not due until after the 11th month after purchase. So you as a user, as a producer, gets to hold on to that premium and use it for your operation until it's due at the end of the 11th month in advance. And if you get an indemnity, an insurance payout, that premium will be netted out of that insurance premium. Insurance payout, sorry. The premium will be netted out of that insurance premium. And the other thing is premiums are subsidized. Just like crop insurance, significant subsidy of the premiums, anywhere from 18 to 50%, depending upon your deductible. The higher the deductible, just like your car insurance and your home insurance, the higher your deductible, the lower your insurance cost, right? Because you're going to have some reduction in that margin that's not going to be insured, i.e. the deductible. So it is a fairly limited program, only $20 million in the entire livestock pilot program. This is a program administered by Risk Management Agency of USDA. $20 million for all of the pilot livestock, and in the last couple of years, dairy's got about 16 million of that. Okay, so I anticipate that's what's going to happen. It was interesting when the president in the springtime came out with his budget proposal. He put in a budget for $100 million for the pilot programs, and we know that that's not going to happen with what's going on in D.C. today. We were hoping it would, but it's a real problem because we've had some experiences where the money's run out and people have made the incorrect type of contract because they were afraid they weren't going to be able to buy LGM down the road. And it caused a lot of problems, especially in 2012. The nice thing about LGM, it's very customizable. You can cover anywhere from 1 to 10 months of production, any percent of your production each of those months. The percent coverage can vary across months. You may want to cover 30% for months 4, 5, and 6, and 50% for 7, 8, and 9. Very, very flexible, subject to what your needs are. You can also choose on your deductible. There's some farm-specific characteristics that are used in setting the contract that determine the premium. So the premiums you get under LGM Dairy are specific to your contract, specific to your operation. And keep that in mind because that's going to be different than what you see under, well, I'll give a couple of slides talking about the federal program being proposed under the Farm Bill. It's not very flexible. as flexible as LGM. You can declare your feed use. I recommend people only declare their feed that they're actually buying. So if they're growing all their energy and just buying some protein, just declare the protein, and that's allowed. Okay? Now what's that going to do? That's going to increase your margin, right? Because the declared feed use is going to be less, and your premium could go up. But again, you're not covering risk that you're really not faced with. If you grow all your own corn, you're not faced with a market risk in terms of buying that corn for energy source. So again, the premiums and contract are specific to you, what you want to cover. And again, it's a very, very relatively flexible program. Let me just give you a little bit more background, just a couple more slides. How this LGM works is when you want to buy this insurance, USDA goes and looks at the settled prices on the futures market on the day of purchase. And it's the last business Friday of the month, every month, once a month. And so that's the role of futures and options. And the futures and options markets give us the expected prices. Remember, I talked about what you thought was going to occur in the future. The futures markets tell us that at that time of purchase. And then the options, and then the actual prices are determined by the final settlement prices of those futures contracts underlying that LGM. But there's no purchases necessary. The key thing to note, and this is where later on we're going to talk about how we can transfer this to your farm, there's no local prices. Your price for corn, your price for bean meal is not taken into account. Your price for your milk, including quality, is not taken into account in setting this up. So there's a little bit of thought process that has to go in terms of saying, hey, I'm insuring $8 a hundredweight LGM margin. What am I actually insuring in terms of my farm? Okay, you need to know those bases between futures prices and your local price. Total expected gross margin is the contract expected milk revenue. Again, I want to emphasize it's a contract, the determination of an indemnity is a contract entity, not a month. It's not evaluated on a month-to-month basis, even though your contract could go for 10 months. It's only the contract performance that matters. Total expected gross margin is the contract expected milk value minus the feed costs. Again, that's going to be the sum of the expected milk prices times the insured milk minus the expected corn and soybean meal prices times the amount of feed declared. And again, there's a single gross margin target. Again, that's your target. That's your minimum income over feed costs. Well, we have to deduct the deductible. Once we take out the deductible, that's going to be your minimum income over feed costs that you're insuring. But it's for the contract as a whole, not on a month-to-month. A lot of people get confused about that, and a lot of people were thinking they should be getting indemnity payments, but they were looking at it on a month-to-month basis. If you have a longer contract, and we never recommend doing long contracts, because of the fact that you could have some good months offsetting some negative months. So they wash out one another because it's contract performance that matters. The nice thing is, in terms of the deductible, obviously a higher deductible, as I indicated before, your premium goes down because of the inherent characteristics of that insurance contract, but also your subsidy goes up. Your subsidy increases, goes from 18% at $0 deductible, and it maxes out at 50% at $1.10, and you can have up to $2 deductible. So you get a double whammy when you look at that deductible. As you increase that deductible, your inherent cost of that insurance contract is going down, but your subsidy is going up as well. So it's really important to look at deductible. We've developed software. We're the go-to site in the U.S. in terms of looking at LGM, evaluating the performance of these contracts. We always give all results for all deductible levels because it's very, very important to look at what the impact of deductible does on your premium, probability of an indemnity, and the level of indemnity.
Doesn't the premium also go down if you do a longer-term contract?
That would depend upon market conditions.
Because the risk is mitigated for the insurance company.
That could be, but if there's a lot more volatility long-term, which there typically is, it could go up. But we're finding, and again, this is just very brief, we're finding that it's better to do, say, 3 or 4 month contracts, say in the middle, say from months 4 to 8 or something like that. You know, there's we know much more for the next couple of months, but we don't know what's going on 7 or 8 months down the road. Okay, so we're almost done here. Total actual gross margin. So now that was this concept of total expected gross margin. You know that. You know what your minimum income over feed cost is when you sign your contract. You know what that is. But now we got to see what actually happens in the market as that contract matures. Okay? So again, we go to the futures market, the final settle prices as those futures contracts settle out, and we take the same amount of production, the same amount of feed, and we just value them at what actually, quote unquote, actually happened. And that I use quotes and actual because it's dependent upon how it's defined by the insurance contract. Okay. So if that guarantee, that's your minimum income over feed cost, is greater than your actual, the actual hasn't lived up to your expectations, you're going to get an indemnity of the difference between the guarantee and what actually happened. But again, there's only one indemnity calculation per contract, regardless of the number of months. Whether you have a 1-month contract or a 10-month contract, only one indemnity computation goes on. Okay. So I got 10 minutes? 5. Okay. 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 I'm going to quickly go through. So what's being proposed on the Farm Bill? This is a hot topic. Everyone knows what's going on. Under the House and Senate versions, there's a margin insurance program being proposed. They're very similar. This is basically the National Milks program that has been touted for the last 2 or 3 years. Again, you're going to set a minimum income over feed cost, and the income over feed cost is based on the U.S. average all milk price and the DSA ration cost that I showed you, which is based on the U.S. average corn and soybean meal price, sorry. Okay. And there's no, and everyone is assumed to have that same ration that I showed you. So there's with it less flexibility in that program. So if you're growing your own feed, the margin insurance assumes that you're purchasing it all. So it may not really be reflecting the risk that you're faced. So for $4 base margin, again, remember that's income over feed cost, it's going to be free, essentially. The indemnity will be the difference between $4 and what you actually show. I'm going to show you the actual DSA margin profile, and you can see, margin profile, and you can see how many times we get below $4. There's just some detail there. Then you can buy supplemental up to $8 a hundredweight margin, and there's a fee for that. It's still subsidized, implicit. There's no statement of what that subsidy is, but it's still subsidized. Again, there's just some different rules in terms of the production that you can cover. The premiums vary by farm size. If you produce more than 4 million pounds of milk in a year, you're charged a higher premium. And that's under I forget which version. I think it's under both versions now. Okay, so now this is the actual, what happened over 05 to 13 of the DSA income over feed cost. So I use the all milk price instead of the mailbox. The all milk price is higher than the mailbox because it doesn't have any of the deducts in it. Okay, so you can see the free level is $4. So history, again, sometimes history is a good predictor, sometimes it's not. At $4, it's not very likely that there's going to be a situation where you're going to need that. But that may not satisfy your needs in terms of covering your actual feed costs. So again, I gave a couple of other horizontal lines showing the maximum is $8 income over feed cost margin under this program, and $6 is in between. So that's the actual monthly DSA income over feed cost margin. Okay. I'm running out of time. So the last few slides, I talk about, okay, this is based on futures markets or on the DSA definition of feed ration, and milk price. Hey, what does that mean for my operation? And I'll go through a couple of things. You can take a look at it on your own. Basically, it boils down to you need to know the basis. You need to know, for example, your local corn futures basis, or all milk, your mailbox basis. You need to do that. And again, take a look at those slides. And the one thing that I do want to mention is that, and I go through the example of LGM Dairy. LGM Dairy assumes your milk is standard milk. And I give the composition here. And most people exceed that, right? So you need to know what that standard milk, farm milk characteristic basis is, if you will. Okay, so you really got to be attuned to that. Go through those other slides, and again, it just gets down to where you know your basis. Okay, so I've covered a very few alternatives, very simple, a lot more sophisticated. I'm not a trader, so I can get blown away by some of the financial stuff that traders bring up. But again, just to get you thinking, the principles are the same. Need to know the trade-offs and what are the possibilities if I do a particular strategy. And finally, on the last page is all the contact info. And if you want my PowerPoint, you can just wait till tomorrow and grab it, and I'll put it up on my website. Okay? Sorry, did I go over time?
Yeah. Well, we have probably a couple minutes for
Okay.
questions, but that's
Okay.
There are any?
Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
As we export more and more of our production, we're at 15 and it's growing. Is there any way to quantify that risk of a loss of market? Do we need actual experience because of black swan events?
The question was, we're exporting more and more of our dairy solids, and can we somehow incorporate that in our risk assessment? And that's a very good question, because that's what happened in 07 and 08. We lost our market share. In 07, New Zealand had a drought. The U.S. went up, stepped up to the plate, and covered their foreign markets. That's when our prices really jacked up. And then, because remember, they're 6 months ahead or behind us, depending upon how you look at it. When they got over that drought, they got back into the market and took their market shares back. And our domestic growth in production is greater than our domestic increase in demand for milk. So what happened? Boom, our prices went down. Well, that may mean you just have to be more conservative. What I would say is, okay, there's another degree of risk that we can't control. That's the thing about getting involved with export markets. There's a good and bad. It's my hypothesis that the more you get involved with external markets, the more volatile those markets are. Okay, so you just have to be more conservative in your planning. Maybe I'm not conservative politically, but I'm conservative financially. So that's the way I would approach it. But and I don't have a diagram here, but if you look at the percent of milk solids exported, it's almost a straight line until 07 and 08, because it took a dip, because New Zealand came back into the market.
It's back higher than ever, isn't it?
Yes, it is. almost 15% solids exported last quarter. So we're setting records every quarter.
Numbers are higher than that.
Again, it's in that ballpark.
And aren't we the most economical source of those products?
No,
Right now?
not at all. Not at all. Well, I don't know what the
New Zealand item got banned,
I'm sorry.
rejected.
I'm sorry.
The exports from New Zealand got rejected.
Well, that was an issue. I don't want to get involved with that. But because New Zealand's a grazing system,
I'm not talking about cost of production. I'm talking about the world price. The New Zealand auction. Jim, can you help me out there?
yeah, I haven't followed those numbers.
Higher than ours right now. Right.
They are? Okay.
So if you're on the world market, U.S. source right now.
Right, and what's amazing is it doesn't cost a lot to ship that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
We're the cheapest price. We're cheaper than
But it's not only
we're cheaper than Europe's price.
but sometimes it's a quality issue. Sometimes it's a standard issue because they want skim milk powder. They don't want non-fat dry milk. Yeah. Right. But believe me, the consensus in the industry is that the growth portion of our market is exports. We expand domestic production or domestic demand maybe 1%, if that's optimistic. And we typically get a 1.5% increase in productivity year over year. So if your demand's only going 1% and your supply is going up 1.5, you can do the math. If you don't get new markets, downward pressure on prices. Good question.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And we could give a nice round of applause for Dr. Gould for his
Thanks for your time.
presentation. Yes, this has been really nice. Just a reminder, if you would be so kind as to complete the seminar evaluation, that's very much appreciated. I didn't mention earlier, but there are credits available for continuing education on this. So if there's folks that would be applied to, please grab the form at the back of the room. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day at the World Area Expo.